Hey everybody, thanks for coming this afternoon. My name is Earle Oxner, manager with Labcorp, specifically with the biopharma side of the house. Most people know Labcorp for diagnostics, which is you go to doctor for your cholesterol test and your glucose test. This is for the side of the house that I support is drug development. My team keeps the IRIS servers running for our clinical trials application, which is actually an international application. Before I get started, I'm preloading the swear jar. Every time I say the word mumps
Or
cachet, my sales team gives me grief, says, put another $1 in the swear jar. You can't talk about technology without saying mumps at least once. So I've already preloaded it.
I'm keeping that.
For most of my career, I've been an application developer. I also did spend about 3 years doing network engineering, enterprise network engineering, 3 years doing site management for a hospital as part of a health chain. My career spans back in the days of DSM, worked in ISM, tandem mumps, and then cache, and then IRIS object script. I've managed DSM, cache, and IRIS platforms. And then as far as technical, I became a team lead in 2004 and started becoming a working manager in 2008. Or as I say jokingly, went to the dark side. I've been a manager ever since, working with teams, but again, just a working manager, never getting my hands off the technology. The main focus of today's talk is going to be our most recent upgrade project, moving all of our systems to a newer version of IRIS and a newer version of Linux. Through my career, rehosted a tandem mumps LIS to DSM on OpenVMS, and all these rehosts are always to keep an application alive, keep it current. We had customers that actually leased that system that was on tandem mumps way back when. So I had to move it so that they could, again, just keep supporting those clients. Moving to LIS for large clinical lab network from DSM to cache, but they remained on OpenVMS. And then Labcorp, as late as it's 2018-ish, I think, they moved from DSM on OpenVMS and made the jump to cache on Red Hat. It was Red Hat 7. Shortly after, they made the switch to IRIS, which was relatively painless. And then most recently, we're migrating that clinical trial drug app from IRIS 2021 on Red Hat 7 to IRIS 2024 on Red Hat 9. Considerations when you're moving to IRIS, if you're moving cache to IRIS, it can be just as simply as moving to a new version of cache. I threw an asterisk there just because anytime you upgrade versions, you always can face new features that might behave a little differently, deprecated features that all of a sudden you might need to make some adjustments to your applications. If you're moving to a new operating system, for anybody out there who's running operating systems that might need to, might be required to move to something like Red Hat or a different OS, if you want to make the move to IRIS, all the obvious things, file system layouts, your device I/O, user connectivity. In our case, we've got users coming in from 4 different connection points, that being old-fashioned terminals, got direct web access to IRIS. We have a thick client that talks to IRIS, and also have one other application that's actually using IRIS directly, just with JDBC.
So I'm Jeff Morgan, sales engineer, also worked on the IRIS migration project. So I literally helped write the book on how to do this. A big point that I wanted to make on this slide is when you're considering moving from cache to IRIS, especially because operating systems are falling out of support for their respective organizations, that's the first question that you need to ask is the current operating system that cache is running on, will it support an IRIS version that you want to move to? And so sometimes you'll move to an older version of IRIS just to keep your operating system the same. And sometimes you'll just decide to switch your OS and your Iris version all in one big jump. And that's what Earle decided and Labcorp decided to do.
Yeah, and also too, some of that's also staying on the old OS can also mean you're staying on old hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And again, now you start running into long-term support issues with just keeping your operation running.
And Iris likes new hardware. It's really fast.
And also, if you're switching to a new OS, your interoperability. You're talking to other applications. You're interfaced. How do they interface with you? You've got, you have to worry about security ciphers and making sure that, you have overlaps. So your system can keep talking to each other. And also even backup mechanism. You start changing OS, change hardware, working with your infrastructure teams again to work on what's that backup going to look like? How's it going to run? And again, just considerations again for upgrading Iris, remaining current, fully supported. And a big one there is, again, security.
Mm-hmm.
Security ciphers. There's, TLS 1.1 is no longer secure. You want to move to something that's got TLS 1.2 is just one example. And also by keeping current, you get a chance to leverage the newest features and capabilities, and you realize the ongoing performance improvements, later releases that as the product comes out. And a little tip thrown in there: validate your plant architecture with InterSystems and your sales engineer. We were talking about performance.
Yeah, so this is what we're talking about, and even this slide is a little bit out of date. It goes even higher, but one of my biggest points that help kind of sell the Iris migration and the work that needs to go into it is the scalability and the performance improvements. This is always mileage may vary based on your application, but in general, Iris, and you can kind of see right in 2020, is exponentially improving every year. It's just getting faster and faster and faster. Now, obviously, that's not sustainable. We're not going to do that forever, but that's a huge selling point for dedicating the time, dedicating the effort into an Iris migration, is that you're gonna get back a lot of that time and effort because it is so much faster.
Just give you a little picture of the footprint that my team supports. There's only 3 of us supporting roughly, it's roughly 90 servers in 4 data centers, one in Dallas, Fort Worth, one in Dublin, Ireland, one in Singapore, and the other data centers are DR data center for all sites in Greenfield, Indiana. For production, we've got 24 Red Hat servers, which is 8 sites or 8 application servers with 3 mirrors each, 2 active, 1 for active failover, and also our DR. We've got 2 Red Hat archive servers, which are simply storing old copies of the application, and also our old VCM product, which was upgraded to Altanji. We still took a snapshot of our old VCM to have it in perpetuity. So we have to go back to. We have 12 Windows servers, 6 sites with 2 mirrors each. The asterisk there, because our next project, when we get done finished our current project, is to move those all to Red Hat. It's just we find it easier just to be supporting one operating system. And now at this point, even though they're on remote sites, they're not in data centers. I think 15 years ago when they first stood these up, the thought of putting a Windows server in a remote site was probably more palatable in infrastructure. Now having a Red Hat server running remotely is nobody bats an eye at it. So we're just going to move everything to Red Hat for supportability. 2 production Altanji DevOps servers, asterisk there, because right now I only have 1. One of the things that's bothered me since I started working for Labcorp was I want that mirrored. We need to have a DR for it. The last thing you want to do is lose your DevOps capabilities in the event of losing a data center or losing a rack. And then we have 3 dedicated production Arbiter license servers. For non-prod, I've got about 50 Red Hat non-prod servers. It's crazy how many development environments and testing environments that everyone felt we needed. But we've got them. And then the 7 Windows servers, which again, the plan is to get those development and test servers moved over to Red Hat in the next year. Deltangi test and DevOps, and then for our arbiter and license functions, we just dual purpose a couple of our non-prods for that. When it comes to doing an upgrade, and we just got done, we're just now completing. Just yesterday, we finished moving our last large system to our Red Hat 9 servers from Red Hat 7. Is planning ahead, and the biggest thing is start earlier than you think and allow for delays. We started the project at the end of 2023. I expect it to be done by third quarter 2024. Here we are, the end of the second quarter 2025, and we're just now getting done. And it's not because of anything our team did. We hit one roadblock after another. Our servers were in place for 7 or 8 years. All of a sudden, it's amazing how many touch points that people forgot about, how many touch points were added in those 6 or 7 years. And all of a sudden they said, wait a minute, what about this system? Oh, they haven't made the adjustments yet for our new, for us moving to new servers. And the other thing is too, if you're doing a new installation, think about your naming conventions and your schemes. It seemed a little crazy to me when I first took on the role. Every single one of our Linux servers, all like 50 plus, actually it's 70 plus, every single one of them has a different name for its instance, for its database, for the namespaces. And we have a scheme set up so that basically it's like, what site is it? What type of server is it? And what application is it? And also the same scheme holds true for the code. While it seems a little bit overkill, there's no errors. Mm-hmm. I get on a server, I know exactly which namespace I am for which site and what that server is. If you meant to do something in the UAT system, but by mistake you're actually in a dev system, or you meant to do it in dev and all of a sudden you're in UAT, it eliminates those errors. Moving on and continuing on with planning, establish and drive aliases for all the systems. There's 50 plus non-production systems. None of them had aliases. Everyone was using server names. Well, when you go to switch your servers out and aliases aren't in place, all of a sudden you have an awful lot of touch points for your cutover. One of the things we did early on was we created the aliases, drove the adoption of them, and one of the key places we did this was we used Deltangi for our DevOps. There's over 50 touch points there between distribution targets that Deltangi knew about, and that the 50 targets all have back pointers back to Deltangi, and everything was using server names. We enacted and completed several changes to replace aliases in everything, and now all of a sudden our cutovers are seamless. We update the alias, Deltangi continues to function. Same thing for the back pointers. It turns out even in production when they first set it up, they were using server names, not aliases, and we're a mirrored environment. We had perfectly good, legitimate aliases, but they simply didn't use the configure. Also, we carry those aliases into our OAuth 2 configurations, were server names. All the applications were using, again, server names. We found one application touch point that was using a server name for our production, even though, again, we're mirrored. We could bounce from one system to another. So I just drove all that through. And same for URLs and SSH configurations. Once we established the aliases, we then had to get new certs for all of our servers. But now it just wasn't server name; it was server name and alias. Also, when you're planning out a large move, lay out your resources, your roles, your accounts. One of the things we drove in this time too was we laid out different resources for production and non-production. If you have your resources and you're using the same resources, you can't enforce a read-only ECP connection to production. We allow an ECP connection to production to allow developers to have that view for supportability to pull data when they're looking to a problem. But if you don't use different resources, it's actually not a read-only connection. One other thing we really hit on big was %all was used heavily on Red Hat 7, on the Iris 2021.1 instances and before. Everything was mapped in %all. But the problem is it's trump card. Anytime you needed to reach to another system using ECP, the percent all in your current system overrode it. It overrode your ability to reach out. So pulled everything we could out of percent all, took the time to map everything out in all the other namespaces. One other thing I cannot emphasize enough is test everything in your sandbox environment first. Test it out. You'll see in a later slide where we have our mirrored systems, and we had 3 mirrored Red Hat 7s and 3 mirrored Red Hat 9s and joined them together. We tested that, ran through our playbooks ahead of time, so we knew exactly what had to do when. As far as our builds, we created a checklist. We call it our playbooks, listing every single configuration item that had to be touched, file that had to be imported, routine that had to be imported. Our playbooks ended up being about 186 steps long for production for our builds. Test and development wasn't quite as long. And one other thing on planning, engaging everyone up front, infrastructure, platform team, system admin, storage, backup. We're coming, we're making the changes, making sure everyone has what they need from us to make sure we can move forward with the build and not hit roadblocks. The application teams was a big roadblock for us. Every time we cleared one roadblock with one application team, we hit another application team that somehow missed the memo and didn't know we were coming. So it's like that being a hard stop for us. Also users, we had to line up users for testing. We have validated applications and controlled applications that need thorough testing, thorough test plans before we can move forward. And user access was a big one, because if you're switching servers and the user access team, especially if they have to provision Iris access on 3 mirrored servers, and now we're going to switch those 3 mirrored servers out on them in production, that became, we spent a lot of time having to work with the user access team for them to update their tools. And we get into the repeatable build process. First thing we did was a master project spreadsheet that detailed all of our systems. We literally started with every single one of our systems. What's the alias? What's the fully qualified domain name of the alias? What's the laid out how many CPUs, how much memory, what are all the mount points? Then we also changed our mount points. So we mapped that space into our new mount points. How much memory, how much CPU. The request number for requesting that server from the server teams. Ultimately, what was the server name we got back? It would end up being a huge master spreadsheet.
Yeah, and you guys built some tooling around this repeatable build process too, to make sure that the same, if you wanted to, you could just switch the name and it would build the exact same thing on a different server with a different name. And I think that was really a valuable time spent by your team to build that out, to make
Absolutely.
To guarantee it was the exact same setup on different systems.
Yeah, we created a build requirement sheet, and our project manager was able to he did all the requests, every single one of them, all 70 some servers. He just requested them one after another after another. The Linux team, we worked with them ahead of time, and they were the first servers on Red Hat 7. They were all pretty much hand-built back when they first did it, because they were running headlong. They were mandated. We need to get off of DSM, off of OpenVMS, need to go to Linux. Everything, they were running headlong and just built them as they went along. So we partnered with them early. They had fully adopted by then using Ansible. So they actually built Ansible scripts to be able to crank out our servers. And then we in turn, for our pieces, create our own bash scripts to create our directories, copy files in place, settle the ownership, settle the protections. And this was key too, because we were moving from cache USR to Iris USR. We were eliminating all the nomenclature. So we had our company has a stand. They will not upgrade the OS, Linux OS in place. We have to move to a new server every time. So that it became really important to make sure that became a cookie cutter process. Early on, we found some glitches. Then as we brought it to their attention, they improved it as time went on. But near the end, we were getting servers like really ready to build and ready to go live. One other thing we did too, we used extensive object scripting. As I shared earlier, we have unique databases, unique namespace names. We built scripts that we just simply run a script, define all our databases. Run a script, define all our namespaces. And just literally became running a script to import all of our, create all of our global routine and package mappings. Because of these unique namespaces, they vary from every system. We couldn't just import them all. Well, we ran a script. We used the table-driven cross-reference that we used in each system to just motor through and create all those mappings. Setting journal file attributes, defining licensed servers. More object scripting we did, loading our Z routines into %sys and all our system management routines into our user namespace. All of our applications use a different namespace naming, but InterSystems delivers this really nice namespace and the database called user with every system. Well, instead of me creating a new namespace, we recently started creating our own system management utilities. We just took over user. Importing any custom resources and roles, granting SQL privileges and procedure privileges. The web apps, we created one set of files for OAuth 2 to be imported into every system, at least for production, and the same thing for our applications. The web apps and the OAuth 2 definitions, we just imported them in every one. And a little tip here, leveraging OS commands and filters where possible, we were importing all of our web apps and then having to manually change all the namespaces. And one evening, sitting there doing this, saying, this is crazy. Found the method call to be able to, actually didn't use the method call. Ended up stepping back saying, why don't we just modify the XML, use the sed command in Linux, modified the namespace before we imported them. That eliminated touching 8 web apps in every one to correct the namespace for the instance. Just using scripting wherever possible and thinking outside the box, not just saying, okay, I need to use object scripts.
And all of that scripting is in their source control too. So everything is locked down. Once that script is, deemed finalized,
right,
no one can break it. And it just guarantees that repeatability, which was huge.
Absolutely. And we did partner with the development team too to review some of our scripting as well. Now for the cutover for go live, the actual go live is exporting users from the old system into the new. For the databases, for the non-production servers, we had to back up, do a backup at time of cutover and do an import. For mirroring production sites, we simply joined the new servers in as mirrors. The nice thing is, crosses versions. It doesn't, the journal file formats support from cache through to Iris if you need to. So we simply join them in as mirrors. At Go Live, I had to recompile all the classes and routines, and that included for the new Red Hat 9 servers running a new version of Iris, because we started with restores of our mirrored database. Iris knows that they are mirrored databases when you restore them, hence they're read-only. Well, we couldn't compile until cutover day to the new version. And then once we updated the VIP for the mirrored systems and redefined the network alias, and everyone tested. Everything tested out, we declare ourselves live. One tip, there's a late entry. Test existing non-production systems prior to cutover. We cut over to production or cut over our test systems, and then somebody said, this isn't working. All right, we're trying to figure out why it's not working. We go back to the original prior system, find out it didn't work there either. Well, we don't want to fix at Go Live something that it was broken before we touched it. We're not taking that opportunity to fix it then. It was broken before, submit a request later and get applications to square it away after we cut over.
That's our first recommendation too, right? If you're seeing something weird in Iris, like this isn't working, or I'm getting a class not found, or something's not compiling, the very first step is go to the cache system and see if it's broken there, because it might be, right? You guys all have tons and tons of code and tons of things. You might have something that just doesn't work anymore and you didn't even realize it. So that's absolutely the first debugging step, especially when you call RB and the WRC.
Yes. And it's just a change all the names to protect the innocent here. It's just one of our mirror monitor screens. I just changed it to be generic member names. But this is what it looked like once we joined in our Red Hat 9 servers running Iris 2024.1 with our Red Hat 7 servers running Iris 2021.1. And then when we went to go live, we simply demoted the backup, promoted one of the Red Hat 9s to be a failover, and then we shut down Red Hat 7 on the primary, and next thing you know, we're running active in Red Hat 9, so we can do our recompiles. But before we did that, we disabled the VIP to make sure users couldn't touch us while we were in that changeover state. Disable the VIP, do the recompile, do the swap around, the shell game, do the recompiles. Then we set our new VIP in place when we're ready to get people in, people ready to start connecting. And the reason we went ahead and requested new VIPs, we weren't going to play the game of worrying about whether or not our old VIP was still in the same subnet as our new servers. So we said, let's get a new VIP and also ease our ability to cut over as well. Some of the challenges.
Real quick, can you go back to that slide? So this is an iris to iris example. This can work with cache as long as you're on the latest version of cache. You can join a mirror system with with a cache and an iris, and they'll play a little nice. We can talk about it afterwards, but I'm not a Linux expert. That's this guy.
And I'm not an expert. I'm more of an advanced user.
Yes. There are some steps that you have to take. Be careful of. Those are all documented in the migration guide. If you're crossing a specific Red Hat version. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, this is really cool because you can have a cache and an iris in a mirror together, and that can help limit the downtime required to do your migration to the new product.
And of course, I'm going to pause a second too, because that meant also if we were rolling back for the non-prod, because all of our non-prods are just single server, we just shut down the Red Hat 9 and fired up the Red Hat 7 again. In this instance, if we needed to roll back a production site, which we did not, there was our last production site that went live, we would have had to have disabled the VIP, make the Red Hat 7 active, and recompile under 2024.1 or 2021.1, which would have updated the code in all 6 servers to now be recompiled under 2021.1, and then made it active again for the users. So that's the only thing with the mirroring is
get on the right version.
Just have it scripted out. I'm a firm believer in Murphy's Law, and if we're fully prepared, nothing will go wrong. If we miss something, that's what's going to bite us. That's why our cutover steps, our cutover plans were about 80 steps. 50% of it was our cutover. 25% was tracking the teams that needed to do the testing, and the other 25% was if we had to back it out, what were we backing out? We had everything fully scripted and actually fully tested just in case. You'd be prepared, chances are things are going to go well. Or if it doesn't go well, at least it goes smoother.
You guys tested the living crap out of this too. Really helped get you prepared.
There was one advantage to having 11 different types of non-production systems between 10 test systems between development and production. There's literally 10 different types of systems for 3 of our sites. It's crazy. But that gave us enough practice that when we got to production, we knew we were good to go. Some of the challenges we hit, jumping from Red Hat 9 to Red Hat 7, one is it's more secure. We actually had to have the Red Hat 8 ciphers loaded on our Red Hat 9 servers. The enterprise was still negotiating a new copy of Reflection enterprise-wide, and our older version of Reflection and Red Hat 9 didn't overlap for the SSL ciphers. So we had to have that as part of the build. Luckily, I think that's now behind us. Another thing is we actually had a filter, a Linux filter that changed behavior. We went to print our first label. I think 6 test systems in, somebody finally decided to try and, hey, let's print a label. Label print didn't work. Turns out there's a filter, and we ran the label. They created a file and ran it through a file conversion called Linux or Unix to DOS. And then we weren't generating labels. It turns out that filter changed behaviors from Red Hat 7 to 9. We had to add a -F to force it. Because if you hit a control character and the first character in these files for the labels had a control character, the conversion actually stopped. By adding the force, it actually converted and we got labels. We spent 4 days trying to figure out what that was. Iris versions, new configuration items. We actually had some new configuration items in 2024 that we had to configure the environment that didn't exist in 2021. Just we found it one of the early systems we did. We also found some deprecated features. We actually are still using we're still using some visual M, which dates back to the 90s. We still had some visual M code running that all of a sudden stopped behaving. Luckily, the application team had a replacement for it. They simply hadn't put it in place yet. That accelerated their implementation to like immediately. And then at that point, we could continue forward with the project. Also, infrastructure policy changes. In 7 years' time, there were policy changes as far as what we were allowed to run on the network. So protocols that were permissible before and security versions that were permissible before, all of a sudden we had to update. We had one system that was talking to us with TLS 1.1 with our very first system. It didn't work. Well, Red Hat 9 doesn't support TLS 1.1. It's only 1.2 and above. The same for Iris. It's configured in 1.2 and above. That's only 1.1 is not considered security any longer. So there were a lot of changes that helped contribute to, as we hit them during testing, that kept extending our time. Because all of a sudden, we hit a hard stop. They can't test and go on to the next environment until that application was fixed or until that touch point was resolved.
To talk a little bit about deprecated features, always review the documentation, the release notes, the migration guide if you're going from Cache to Iris. At this point in time, I think we've caught everything and documented it in the migration guide of what is either changed or no longer there. And always reach out to your sales engineer for help if you need guidance reviewing those documents.
And just to hit this really quickly, some of the other challenges were the length of time since our last platform move, 6 or 7 years. People have left. People forget about there's new application integrations as someone didn't realize. We hit one instance, actually we hit something in production where somebody said, we can't print labels from this other system. It's like this, all of a sudden I realized nobody ever talked about testing that in any of our testing. Luckily, it was something that was just fixed with it very quick. They had to update the public key on their system because we had switched servers. But it's something they actually had not even tested before we got to production. So add it to the list for the next time. One of the issues we hit too is our server requests. Our project manager was outpacing us with server requests. Because the other thing is there was going to be a bum's rush to get all their servers because there was a lot of Red Hat 7 out there. The whole infrastructure all the other teams needed to request. We tried to get on the early adopter and try and get them as quickly as possible. When we started realizing there were some issues with the build, we were already like 15 servers in. They already delivered 15 servers before they made adjustments to the build. So we had a lot of remediation for some of those earlier servers because we simply requested them faster than we were able to keep up and build them out.
Did that prove to be a big problem, or was that just...
It was a nuisance for us.
Yeah. And
we had to submit a lot of extra tickets to the Linux team to fix things that were actually not an issue later. And then we actually hit a really interesting situation. They created a DR server for us that was not named with the DR server naming convention. I had just gotten done building the whole thing out, had it ready to go, and the infrastructure team said, oh no, we need to build a new server. I'm like, you're kidding, right? I said, no. There's not a migration path for a server. The guidance I received was probably appropriate, which is you need to build out get a new server, build out a new Iris, and then re-import everything. And I said I wasn't going to do that. So on the new server, I installed Iris. I had the Linux team take everything off the other server and just plunk it right over top, except for having to fix a couple of file protection issues. And then I had to reinstall the certs that were created. It actually worked. It is not recommended. The WRC does not recommend doing that. I was able to do it. But luckily, one of the features we have that's going to help with that, I'm going to go from the bottom up for this one. In a future release, InterSystems is actually creating a security database that can be shared or can be mirrored. So therefore, where I had to create the web apps, install it in 3 different mirrors, OAuth 2, fix it in 3 different mirrors, import the users in 3 different mirrors, build out your web gateway in 3 different mirrors. All of a sudden, you build it in one and it's mirrored. I would not, if I had to rebuild that server, it would have been really easy to do that. Because what I wanted to avoid was having to do all of those manual changes I had to make on the system. Apparently with 2026, that's now going to be a mirror database, which is going to make my life a lot easier.
Make everyone's life a lot easier.
Because every time the application team says, we have a new web app we want to put in, well, I now have to put it in 21 different production servers for 7 sites. Because it's one in each mirror, now it's going to do it 7 times and we're done. CPF merge utility, we didn't use it much. I'm going to look at that for future builds. I'm going to look at...
I can touch on that a little bit. So the older, still supported way is the installer manifest, right? So that's how you can script your instance to kind of be the same every time you install a new Iris. You can use the installer manifest in our installer scripting to do that. That still works. That's effectively been supplanted by the CPF merge. And the CPF merge is a very similar tool, except that we have the scripting in our side of the world, and you just bring your CPF and you put your CPF parameters in the input file, and then our code, the InterSystems code, will go and create the namespace, create the database, create the mappings, create the web apps, and do all the things, and you don't have to script those one by one in your installer manifest. So it's a little bit more automated in the CPF merge utility. So it's a little easier. They had already built a lot of their scripting, so it wasn't worth it to go and rebuild it and kind of reimagine how to build out the instances. But maybe one day.
Yep. Also, we were on a time. I missed one here. We were on a time crunch. It's the only reason we did the server OS upgrade and the Iris at the same time. We had fallen behind in Iris, and we have a corporate mandate to stay current. And because we lost so much time, we didn't have a choice but to do both at once. But actually, it really didn't pose that much risk. We had a couple of issues, one for Iris, a couple for Linux. We had to deal with all together, but it really was not a great deal of risk there. Just create a little bit more challenging. The other thing I wanted to look at in the future is Iris interoperability and leveraging it more. We do have one server that just does interoperability. That's all it runs on. All of our other 7 environments are just doing that clinical drug trials reporting function. I want to see if we can't leverage more interoperability there to help alleviate some of the issues we ran with touch points with some of the other applications with which that system talks. I'll call you. Also want to reorganize our playbooks. I realized later in the build that I could combine multiple steps into one and just done one large swath of creating directories and one large swath of things we did within Iris with ObjectScript. It just at the time we were so deep into it, we're so used to the playbook, we don't want to rearrange it. But I could probably compress my playbook by at least 25%, if not more, by simply combining steps. It's more of, we're on this step, let's do this stuff. We're on this step, let's do this next set of stuff. Well, if we combine them and just do all the setup in the beginning and then start doing the rest of it, it's the same net effect. It's just now it would be a little less steps.
especially when you know what your if you already know what your directory structures are going to look like, if you already know how you want that to look, it's really easy to put all that together. Create the whole thing. Now, Iris doesn't need it, but it's good to do ahead of time.
And the last thing I need to do is make sure we capture all our artifacts, get everything updated, put it away, because I'm going to need it again in 3 or 4 years when Red Hat 10. We need to do that move.
When you forgot it all.
Not going to forget it all. Nope, you're going to keep this time.
Yep.
Because the last time these servers were built, they're running headlong. Get off OpenVMS, get off of DSM, build a server, move to the next one. None of the servers were built the same because they learned something, they went to the next one, learned something, moved on, went on, and never went back to make the others the same. And this time we made the whole thing cookie cutter, all of them exactly the same. I'm sorry?
Container.
The only thing is containerization has come up oftentimes, but our servers run as a single server with touch points coming in. And there's not a lot of benefit. You're not running multiple copies of, it's not like we have multiple app servers. If we had multiple app servers on like an app server tier and having containerization, be able to spin another one up, that would make sense. But we've looked at it, and the amount of work we'd have to go into containerizing it that would help with the upgrades, but we still have to test every single one of our environments, have to go through full validation before we can go on and then do the upgrade to the next one. It would make, press a button and containerize it, spin up the container under a new version would help.
Yeah.
In the future, when we go to Red Hat 10, well, we just set up a container, change the characters, and say, okay, let's start testing this.
And maybe that's something we do take a look at. It certainly might take a little bit of the load off of my team, but it doesn't help us get Red Hat, get the next version of Iris spun out on Red Hat 10 any faster, simply because the long pole is all in that testing. And that's all I had.
What are you looking at me for?
Yes.
Questions?
I believe they're using WebSphere for one of the apps. Another app I think they're using, I think it's actually just Citrix. They're coming in from a thick client running on Citrix. But I think it's WebSphere is what they're using for the one app that comes in. Or we're using Web Gateway. We have WebSphere for one app that comes in for what's called study definition. And then we also have, you're running it natively with Web Gateway. Some clients, some users are coming in and authenticating with Okta. And
For your ECP connections, do you have, it sounds like you've got everything upgraded to 2024 now. Do you have 2024 ECP copy that in older version?
we do have 2021. We were doing 2021 to 2024 through this because we had 2024, the dev servers went first. And each of our development servers has a read-only connection to production, which we're still running 2021. And now we are running a 2021 dev server. Our main dev server had to be the last one to get upgraded because that feeds the code up through all the other environments. And just today, we hit a new wrinkle where, where they can't access the classes from 2021 to 2024. But that's more of a class issue. That's not ECP. They can get there. Just the classes is the one issue they've got. And there was just a bulletin about that.
Yeah.
So now we're going to hurry up and get that one updated. But always ECP is working fine between the different the mixed environment.
That's the biggest thing to worry about is the code differences, the
Right.
class differences between the versions. But a global is a global, right? So your data is going to be the same across all your nodes.
All right, and that's it. I mean, it was a big project that, thank goodness, we did have the pauses and the 1 year or plus delays. It allowed us to plan more, ferret out more, and be better prepared when we went into it.
I wanted to ask, because I actually don't remember, did you run into any issues when we removed the private Apache out of the product? Or no? You
No.
guys were already running your management portal through a full web server.
We did it both ways.
Okay.
We simply used that as a crutch, but now if taken it away, we run
Yeah.
it all through Apache.
Yep.
Which version did that come out?
RB, do you know? I think it was 23.2. Yeah, so for big, the major release, it would be 24.1 would be the first one. So I don't know the details, but if you do an upgrade, we'll remove the Apache out of your Windows install, like where you installed Iris, we'll take Apache out on either Windows or Red Hat. Windows, okay. So be careful, but we've got a lot of bulletins on that. So you should be covered. And if you have any questions, talk to your sales engineer.
There you go.